Moving on to the next question, which will be addressed to Mr. Patterson, Mr. Weaver, Mr. Orange, Mr. Page. There's a perception by some that there is a difference of opinion over transportation policy, with bicycles and streetcars being pitted against buses. Do you believe this difference exists? And if so, how would you address it? Mr. Patterson.
So there's a perception that there's a difference between bicycles and buses. Is your question?
Bicycles and streetcars versus buses.
Well, I support the streetcars. I don't think there is a perception in the difference of how they're perceived. Sitting on the bicycle advisory council, I support the bicycle lanes that we've had, but I think we should have engaged the community a lot better. We didn't do a good job. I work right there on 15th and M, and they didn't engage the community whatsoever in putting those lanes in. So I think when we talk about the perception, it also goes with the community, engaging the community and making sure that the community is aware of what is being put in, whether it's metro, the bikes, or the streetcars, but making sure that the community is involved in those decisions.
Mr. Weaver?
I view this as all part of an integrated part of the system of public transit. I think that what's good for one part of the city may not be necessarily good for another part of the city. I think if you look at Uptown, Northwest, Columbia Heights, Adams, Morgan, part of the downtown corridors, the density of those places probably lead more towards bicycle paths and elements around bus service. Where streetcars are being looked at, I think is a great part of an overall scheme for public transit. I often view that things that we're looking at in terms of public transit often sort of move Metro and Department of Transportation. Are we moving Metro dollars to things such as the circulator or such as the streetcars, which are going to move that more into control of DDOT? This is an overall system of how we move as people within the city. So maybe it doesn't work as much in Kenilworth to have bike lanes as it would in Columbia Heights, but I don't think you give up one for the other.
Mr. Orange?
Yeah, I believe that the issue really was one of how do you win the election at that time. All this came to a head in the election. You had Mayor Fenty on one side with the bike lanes and streetcars, and you had Mayor Gray on the other side, and it was a way to gather votes and mobilize people. At the end of the day, if you look at it, I think that there should be a livable, walkable community along the Capitol waterfront. That's what Councilmember Tommy Wells is advocating. If you bring the streetcars up Bladensburg Road and down 8th Street, let's finish what's already there. We're not ready to go forward because the rest of it is billions of dollars. We don't have that. But there's an integration. I mean, you need the buses, and overall, there just needs to be a balance. We have a lot of cars on the streets in the morning. You don't want all the cars. There's environmental concerns. So at the end of the day, I just think there's a balance, and I do believe that it just depends on what area we're trying to develop and what's suitable for a particular area. It would be suitable coming down M Street by the baseball stadium to have the streetcar.
Mr. Page?
Yes. Yeah, I've heard arguments about bikes and streetcars versus buses, and some of it seems to be positioned as if there's somewhat of a culture clash, as if they're entirely different, separate and distinct groups of people who will be riding buses versus riding on bikes and riding the streetcar. There is some empirical data that shows that people by far prefer riding streetcars to riding on buses, and I think that's something that should be taken into account. Clearly, streetcars are more environmentally friendly. I believe the streetcar, as planned, will hold more persons than a bus will. There's the fact that fixed lanes encourage developments along the fixed lane versus bus lines, which can be arbitrarily changed. I think that even though we have a budget crunch and that we may have to make hard choices about what we want to support, I think ideally we would like to have a multimodal system of transportation that's all interconnected. And thank you. It's so tough to do it in 60 seconds.